They never saw you coming. They spent years perfecting their grip, mastering the art of deception, twisting ideas into chains. They ruled with fear rather than strength. Whispers in the dark, unspoken norms that nobody dared to break. They deemed themselves uninjured. Their assertions are absolute. And yet, here you are. Not because you have figured everything out. Not because you came with revolution in your hands, but because you brought something much worse. Truth. Do you understand how strong this makes you? While others bowed, you stood. While others accepted, you asked. And without moving a finger or raising your voice, you shattered the illusion they had worked so hard to construct. That was the worst-case scenario they could imagine. Not a weapon-wielding opponent, but an uncontrollable attitude. The game has changed. The truth cannot be hidden. The illusion is shattered. And it all started with you, for God's word is fast, powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword. Hebrew people, a sword does not need to be used to cut deeply. A fire does not need to be roaring to consume the truth. The true, undeniable, unbreakable truth does not have to be screamed to be heard. It does not need to battle to win. It just needs to be said. The voice of authority enters the room as smoothly as polished stone, measured and determined. Every sentence is placed like a brick in a wall, designed to be removed. There are no holes, defects, or areas for ambiguity. This is how they have ruled. Not via chains or force, but with certainty. They talked, and others followed. Nobody questioned what they had announced. They have built their power on the unchallenged assumption that their word is final. But suddenly something has changed. It seems little at first. A pause that lasts too long, followed by a stare that does not immediately return to mindless devotion. A forceful breath taken when there should have been relaxation, generating a ripple in the calm water. They instantly notice you. This shouldn't happen. You should be invisible. Just another nameless face in a sea of harmony. But something inside them stirs. Something hidden behind the weight of their own might. They hesitate. It is faint and hardly noticeable. The audience doesn't notice it. The devoted do not acknowledge it. But you do. A fracture. A sliding in the mask. That's enough. You do not holler. You do not fight. You do not argue. You do not challenge them in the way that they expect. How they're prepared. Instead, you convey a single fact. Consistent and quiet. There is no strength behind it. There is no anger or demand. Just the truth. And truth does just what it always does. It has a long-lasting effect. It detects the fractures. It overcomes boundaries that were never intended to oppose something as simple, honest, and sincere. For the first time, they do not deliver their remarks with finality. Their voice lacked authority. The magic does not weave itself back together. Instead, there is stillness. It expands. Unnatural. Thick. Wrong. There is hesitation when permission is required. Where there should be reassurance. There is something more. Something hazardous. It spreads. It moves through the throng. Not loud enough to spark a revolution. Not strong enough to defy, yet certainly present. A shift. A stirring. The first tremor comes before the ground gives way. They see it. This area was under the supervision of the person in charge. These people ruled over the world. They created. They see it. They were not scared of war. They were never afraid of resistance. They were never afraid of force. They were afraid of it. Just a second. One word. One undisputed fact. I spoke frankly, refusing to be ignored. They are aware that cracks have formed. The foundation has been touched, and anything they do or say will not work. And you'll know the truth. And the truth will set you free. John, the truth has always been there. Waiting, whispering, knocking on the doors of the soul. But not everyone is ready to hear it. Some folks turn away. They're anxious about the financial ramifications. Some people bury it in rituals, rules, and the voices of those professing to speak for God. However, the truth is patient. It does not force itself on the unwilling. It awaits the moment when the heart, weary of limitations, begins to awake. Initially, they do not come. They halt to observe from the corners of their cage, which is kept together by hidden connections. They do not dare to name anybody. They live in a prison with no walls, held together by the weight of expectancy rather than physical strength, by the fear of straying too far from what they have always known. However, chains cannot last eternally. Fear cannot silence the voice inside them. The voice that murmurs things is not correct. So they come one by one. Not all. Only those whose spirits continue to push, stretch, and seek authenticity. They do not appear in daylight. Not yet. They vanish into the darkness, drawn by something they cannot explain. Something inside you communicates without words. The first individual hardly breathes as they confess. It never felt right. It is quietly spoken, yet it carries much more weight than sound. It's more than just uncertainty. It's the first crack in the foundation that they were told would never break. And cracks do not stay little. Another follows, a voice filled with something more than fear, something desperate. Why don't we ever feel peaceful? Why do we continually giving and never seem to receive? They do not express these things openly. The questions appear like stolen moments wedged in the cracks of years of obedience. Every sentence seems dangerous. Every concept, an act of defiance. They cringe, as if they expect to be condemned, as if expecting retribution. But you don't respond. Not yet, because this is not about you. This is about them. They've been taught their whole lives that the devil is the one who questions a rebellion, that their anguish indicates weakness. However, they were told to neglect some sections. Something's shifting. The anxiety that formerly kept them back is fading away, loosening, like the last strands of a frayed rope. And when they look at you, they see something they have never seen before. Someone who is not afraid. Someone who refuses to obey the rules that have entrapped them. Someone who left an area after being told there was no way out. It is not gone. Not yet. The horror still exists. A phantasm of its earlier power. But something else has taken root. Something similarly powerful. Something their leader did not want them to discover. Hope. And that is hazardous. The illusion is beginning to crumble around the edges. Long before the commander realizes it, a transformation has occurred. A stealthy and insidious decay, hiding in stares that endure 1 second too long. In situations that seem somewhat less rigid. It is subtle but evident. The once strong order now sways. The planned capitulation gestures lose precision. Some hesitate, others overcompensate. Some even cease the act altogether. And first, the person in the center of it all seemed unconcerned. They continue as they have always done, standing straight with the burrowed confidence that has always defined them. But their words sound different now. The authority they formerly wielded like a sword is no longer effective. Their gaze wanders over the people in front of them, searching for the confidence they've always had, but instead finding something quite different. The balance has altered. They cultivated fear for a long period. The ethereal bond that kept each soul together is weakening. And when their gaze falls on you, they understand why you don't need to act. You don't have to speak. You do not have to provide any commands. Your presence alone is enough. They built their dominion around dread. Terror, however, cannot persist when its victims lose trust in the monster wielding it. For there is nothing concealed that will not be revealed. Nothing should remain concealed that cannot be detected. Lucas 2. The truth cannot be buried forever. It rises without rage or force, but with confidence, like a long since sown seed, waiting for its turn. And once that seed has burst through the earth, no amount of darkness will keep it from reaching the light. Those who built their authority via silence, obedience, and the shivering horror of those under them, they can sense it right now. The ground is shifting under their feet. The walls they vowed would never fall apart are crumbling, and the foundation they once stood on is now sand. However, they will not go quietly. No, they will fight. They're going to yell. They will repeat every falsehood they have ever spoken, thinking that just stating it louder would make it real. They want control, much like a guy drowning in deep water. But it slips through their fingers. The more they try to tighten their grasp, the weaker it becomes. Because fear-based rules are not fixed in stone. It is made from glass. It may seem solid. It may stay firm for a while. But once a crack occurs, it is just a matter of time until everything shatters. And what caused the first crack? There will be no war, uprising, or use of force. An inquiry, a whisper, a moment of hesitation. The first step towards truth is seldom easy. It is never loud. It's subtle, hesitant, and almost undetectable. It's someone standing in a crowded room for the first time, feeling the weight of the lie bear down on them. It's a subtle shift in posture, a lowered stare from someone who no longer believes what they hear. There is a profound sensation that something is awry. At first, they shove it aside. They try to ignore it. They persuade themselves that they are erroneous. However, the premise does not change. It lingers. It grows. Then they realize that someone else is feeling the same way. A look is exchanged. They have a moment of understanding. Neither speaks, yet both understand. Do you see it too? It starts with one, followed by another. Until suddenly, what was once a sea of obedience is shifting, developing, and transforming into something new. They do not need to be let out. They do not need direct instruction. They only need to see. The door was never locked. The rulers are aware of it. They recognize the moment has come. They stand in front of their people, forcing them to listen. They raise their voices in desperation, asking for devotion and faith. They call for obedience, cooperation, and confidence. But their words, once as sharp as knives, have fallen to the ground like dust because their people are no longer listening. They never held power for themselves. It was borrowed and generously given by people who believed in them. That conviction vanished abruptly. They do not have shackles, prisons, or guns to force people into obedience. They just have the illusion that they created. And now the illusion is dissolving. The truth is returning, and nothing can stop it. The rain fell. The waters came. The winds pounded and damaged the house. And it fell. It was a great fall. Matthew, a house built on sand will stand tall for a time. It may soar high, seem forceful, and cast a big shadow. However, when the storm strikes, the waves rise, and the soil underneath it shifts, it falls since it was never intended to last. That's what they built. A castle of words, a kingdom of illusions, and a throne founded on the fragile trust of those who followed them. And now, the storm has come. The fractures appeared slowly. Initially, there existed an unspoken concept and an unacknowledged uncertainty. Their commands landed less firmly than in the past. They ignored and rejected it, hoping that if they just kept talking, asserting, and pressing, they would be able to close the gaps before they widened. The truth is like water. When it finds a way in, it seeps through every crevice, fills every fracture, and presses against every weak spot, causing the whole structure to collapse. They can feel it now. They can see it in the faces in front of them. Faces that were previously fixated on each syllable. They are now watching with fresh eyes. Neither revolt nor anger. Something even worse. Awakening. They beckon you. Not with an outstretched hand or humility, but with authority. This is how they have always ruled. Calling and expecting a response implies demanding and assuming compliance. They believe their voice is still strong, and their very presence will bring you to your knees. But you do not move. You do not bow. You do not flinch. For the first time, they grasp what it is to be powerless. They continue to converse as they normally do. Years of preparation had sharpened their comments, and they use scripture like a weapon, enveloping their instructions in righteousness and speaking with confidence. But certainty is meaningless without trust. They can no longer summon trust since it has been given and reclaimed. They grab for the control, but it's no longer there. They reach for fear, but it has already left the premises. The earth underneath them remains stable. It's gone. And suddenly the world knows what has always been true. They were never the foundation. They were just the illusion of it. Illusions do not resist a storm. Their webs will not be made into clothes. They must not disguise themselves by their efforts. Isaiah 6. The web was methodically spun, thread by thread, and securely coiled to hold the world in place. Every word they spoke, every law they passed, every fear they inspired, everything was part of the design. They wove it like a tapestry. They believed that if no one yanked on the edges, it would hold. But a web is not a fortress. A web is fragile, and if one thread is broken, the whole structure unravels. If your heart is full of God's blessings, let that love shine. Click this super thank you button and contribute $1 or more to plant seeds of faith that will influence countless lives. Your generosity symbolizes His riches. Be a conduit for His grace. and see his kingdom expand through you. They can see it slipping away, crumbling before their own eyes. This is not how things were supposed to be. They were in command. They were the ones who decided what was true and false, what was permitted and what was banned. However, they are now standing on shifting ground. The confidence they once provided has fled, replaced by an unforeseen, lethal doubt. They try to reconnect the strands. They turn to old techniques. They recognize the rituals, symbols, and ceremonies that once bound their world together. They meet in poorly lighted areas. Their voice is subtle but insistent. Their hands are sketching patterns in dust that has lost its electrical charge. They murmur the same sentences that used to send shivers down people's spines. They summon the powers that had before answered without delay. But there is no reaction. The air does not shake. The earth does not move. The forces on which they depended are no longer there, just quietly watching. And they are left alone and defenseless. Those who formerly dreaded them now see them as little, desperate, and ineffective. They see the weaknesses in the foundation, the holes in the mask, and the terror hiding under the voice that once ruled them. Everything changes in a moment. The leader raises his voice in authority, appealing, and desperation. But the words fall flat. They're no longer driven by any force. They cannot be realized because they lack the necessary force. They repeat sentences that used to make people tremble. However, they abruptly sound like empty sounds in the air. Those who formerly followed them no longer look to them for guidance. They do not cower. Do not bow. Do not wait for permission. They are no longer afraid. You're here for a reason. If you feel called, answer it. Click. Join to get access to exclusive material, in-depth insights, and a supportive community. This is not just a membership. It's an awakening. Begin your heavenly mission. Join the chosen because they now know the truth. It was never about power. It was never about divine will, fate, or destiny. It was all about belief. Belief cannot be manipulated, tricked, or duped into obedience. It's supplied, and when it is removed, nothing remains. The leader stands there, watching as the world they made collapses, not with fire or destruction, but with knowledge. They are no longer required by the people they formerly ruled. And that is how they really end. A single voice interrupts the silence, not too loud or demanding, but powerful enough to upset the quiet. It was all a lie. The words fall like shattered glass. Small, but irrevocable. Then another voice joins. And another. We were pawns. The weight of their consciousness increases. A slow, unrelenting ripple. The figure in the center represents all tenses. Hearing and feeling it. Knowing there's no going back. The air shifts. Thick with something new. Awareness. Clarity. Recognition. The tide is turning. The whispers become into announcements. Not in defiance, but rather in understanding. We sacrificed all for nothing. We were stuck without recognizing it. The person who formerly had power seeks to reclaim the moment, to talk, to redirect the attention that is slipping away. However, the words do not have the same effect. They land empty, stripped of whatever effect they once had. There were no broken shackles or forced open locks. However, the illusion is disintegrating. Nobody needed to be let out. They only needed to see. The door had not been locked at all. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. John 1 verse 5. Darkness does not resist light. It does not rage. It doesn't fight back. It does not engage in combat. It just ceases to exist. The moment the light emerged. This is the essence of truth. It doesn't need an army, weapons, or force. It merely needs to be seen. And once it is, the opposing illusion falls under its own weight. At first, it's only a flicker, a little ember catching the wind. Someone takes a step back, uncertain, yet unable to deny what they have learned. Another follows, then another, until the ground under the leader's feet begins to shift. Those who had stood quietly now exchange looks. An unsaid understanding, passing between them. No words should be exchanged. They sense it, the urge to participate in something worthwhile, something free, something beyond the constraints. They had made a mistake about safety. Then it happens. One turns, then another, and another. A slow trickle grows into a flood, then a tide that cannot be stopped. The room feels smaller. not because the space has changed, but because the power that previously existed inside it has drained away. The leader continues in the same position. The relevance of what is happening. I'm closing in on them. They yell, their voice wobbling at the edges as they try to hold on to what is sliding away from them. You need me. Their statements are delivered as a plea rather than a pronouncement. But people no longer need them. They never did. They were bound not by force, but by belief, by well-designed lies that had previously seemed impenetrable. And now I'm standing in the face of something greater, something unquestionable. Those fallacies have lost their traction. The leader's voice rises, and desperation sets in. Where electricity used to be, they demand obedience. They expect loyalty. However, the words ring hollow now, resonating against walls that can no longer bear their force. You do not move. You don't speak. You don't have to. The truth has already been revealed. That is enough. The mask cracks, the carefully crafted image collapses, and the formerly untouchable individual is left standing in the ruins of their own deception. They did not fall because they had been flung. They didn't lose because they were defeated. They lost because they were monitored. Now there is nothing left to do. There's nothing left to say. People turn and leave one by one. The one who once ruled sits among the rubble of what they built. They believed that by looking at the empty space where their walls formerly stood, they might block out the world. That they alone had the authority to decide who may pass through and who would be stuck. However, the truth was never theirs to retain. The door was always open. They were never the gatekeepers. They never had influence over anyone's fate. You didn't have to kill them or remove their authority. It was a delusion that could not withstand its own weight. And today, as you pass the remnants of their kingdom, the air seems different. The crushing grip, the calm hold that once strangled every doubt before it could form. It's gone. This place no longer responds to fear. It no longer belonged to those who controlled it with invisible chains. It belongs to those who found their own way out. They turn to you, not with the uncertainty they previously experienced, not with the horror that had been ingrained in them, but with something else, understanding expectations. Because, in their opinion, you were the one to exhibit it. You stood while no one else did. You declined to submit when asked. You dispelled the delusion they had been forced to live under. And so they wait, anticipating the next command, the next leader to recover the already abandoned throne. But you do not relocate since they do not need another ruler. They were never meant to serve. They were not expected to follow. Nothing would have changed if you had come up to replace the fallen individual. So you remain stationary, knowing that true power does not need control, it gives it out. And when they see past you and turn to confront their own destinies without seeking permission, they understand this country was never meant to belong to a single voice. It belongs to every one of them. Every plant that my heavenly Father did not plant will be dug up. Hello, Matthew. A rootless tree cannot stand. It may thrive for a while, stretching toward the sky with branches reaching out as if it belonged to the mighty. However, as the winds shift, the soil underneath it trembles. The storm eventually comes, and it falls, not because it was destroyed or damaged, but because it was never properly planted in the first place. That's what they built. A kingdom of branches with no roots, held together by the trembling faith of those who feared them. They talked, and their words became laws. They gave orders, and their subordinates carried them out. They moved. The ground underneath them bowed. But it was not real. They now stand alone, free of the illusion that formerly made them invincible. The voice that once spoke with great conviction has quieted, swallowed up by the quietness of what they have lost. Nobody had to push them from their throne. Nobody had to make them let go. They wasted the opportunity. Their power was put into question, since power based on terror is ineffectual. You do not look back. There is nothing left to see. The weight that formerly weighed heavily on your shoulders, as well as the invisible restraints they tried to wrap around your ideas. It's gone, and that was never your responsibility to bear. They imagined they could transform you into their image and claim you as their own, teach you the language of submission, of obedience, of silence. They felt they could corrupt your purpose, diminish your spirit, and imprison you in the cell they mistook for a kingdom. But you were not meant to bow. That's what concerned them from the beginning. It wasn't your words. It was not your actions. It was your presence. They saw it before you even spoke. Before you ever stood in anything, you did not belong to them. And this frightened them since they couldn't control you. Anything they cannot control must be destroyed. It was their mistake. They thought that their words had the power to alter reality and hold the world together. They were speaking into an ethereal kingdom. However, when the illusion was shattered and the first cracks appeared, it was only a matter of time until everything collapsed. They did not lose because you took their kingdom. They lost because you proved it was not real. So you go forward, not in exile or retreat, but in the freedom that they said did not exist. The path does not need your cooperation. The sky does not hold its breath while waiting for your submission. The world is vast, and it is yours, and it has always been.